Welcome to the second seminar today in the Retrofit zone. My name's Pither. I'm a technical director at Retrofit Academy, and it's fallen to me to chair this session, which is about retrofit assessment. I'm not going to try, if anyone was here before, you may have heard Andy Parkin trying to make jokes about people's names. I'm not going to try and replicate that, I can't compete. But we're honoured to have with us the current still Retrofit Assessor of the Year, Jarrod for another 6 hours, and Professor Richard Fitton from Salford University. So I'm going to hand over to each of them to present to you on retrofit assessment for 10 or 15 minutes each, and then we'll hopefully have 15-20 minutes after that for you to throw questions at them, and hopefully have an interesting discussion around retrofit assessment. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jarrod to kick us off.
Hi everyone, this is retrofit assessments for what does good look like. As Alan said, I'm Jarrod Green. I'm the current Retrofit Assessor of the Year for the next 6 hours. So good luck to the next person. As you can see, I've qualified in all the disciplines, but for the last couple of years, we've been concentrating on retrofit assessments within Equans. So moving on, to start off what good looks like, we need to see what bad looks like. So bad looks like, so when you're out on site, the bad assessment, which we've had experience with, is lack of communications with the key players within the retrofit process. Retrofit assessors not knowing what they're supposed to be doing out on site. There's poor communications with regards to the retrofit coordinator, designer as well. Sometimes we forget that the retrofit assessor needs to have a conversation with the designer as well, or be involved in those meetings to see what they are planning on doing. Also, not aware of what path they're looking to achieve. Yeah, we're at Equans, we'll always assess to a risk path C, just because that's where we feel that we should be. Not completing measured surveys. We have many people which we've used in the past. They don't know what a measured survey is. Lack of understanding of what the information is for and why they've actually collecting it. I know most of us are probably DEAs here at the moment. We've got a process of collecting the necessary information. Sometimes we don't necessarily need to know what we're actually collecting that for. Another important thing is the actual not understanding the physics of buildings, the makeup of the buildings, how the building's working. Just poor evidence photos. I mean, we've seen a lot of condition reports where we've got blurred out photos. How can the retrofit assessor, the designer, go from that? Not sharing information between parties as well. We're quite fortunate where we work at Equans is we've got a small team of about 8 assessors where we will communicate with each other. But I've experienced where we've seen assessors going down the same road, and you've got different age, the age is wrong, the construction is wrong, and they're next door to each other. There's no communication between each other. And at the end of all this, bad stuff is you're not achieving the outcomes you're looking to achieve because we haven't collected that necessary information. So, what does good look like? This is, from our point of view, there's a lot of retrofit assessors out there which will do it their way, but this is how we would like to do it. Good communications between all the parties. We're quite fortunate where we are is that I can be able to, as a retrofit assessor, I will be able to speak to the coordinator, the designer, the installer. So our assessors will get a good understanding of the project. Assessing the property, always to path C. Clear and accurate floor plans. Good quality evidence photos. A good understanding of construction and building physics. Understanding ventilation, that is a key thing for retrofit assessment, is understanding ventilation, how it works. Teamwork, a good client and tenant interaction. When you're in the properties, it's not a 30-minute EPC anymore. You could be in there for an hour and a half to 2 hours. You're in, and it's not just a photo of a thickness of a wall anymore. It's very intrusive. You're asking them questions. You're looking into the corners of their properties, of the rooms, and just accurate and logical condition reports. Right. The stages of retrofit assessment. Okay. Pre-visit assessment, on-site assessment, and the dreaded writing up the condition report. Right, pre-assessment. There's a lot you can actually do before you actually arrive at the property. Yeah, you could check the previous CPC, not necessarily always accurate. Plus, what we do now as in part of the retrofit assessment is we forget about the 10% 10% rule with regards to alternative walls and construction. We need to know all parts of that building. Local knowledge is key as well. Checking planning applications. Is the property protected? Because that will kick into a different type of survey we will need to do. Significant assessments. Age and constructions of the properties. Is the property in a conservation area or is it a TPO? I mean, conservation areas, you know, the designer is going to need to know that firsthand because, you know, we need to go to planning to possibly get new windows and doors put in, or EWI. Is the property in a floodplain, radon area? Is there going to be a potential party wall problem? Types of property, you know, streetscape. Let's see what the neighbouring properties will look like. Orientation and location. These are the sort of things that our team will do prior to us going out. So we've got a good understanding of what we're expecting to arrive to. Right, on-site assessments. This is where it changes a lot from being a DEA to a retrofit assessment, to a retrofit assessor. Yeah, the key thing, as I mentioned before, is tenant-owner engagement. As I say, we're in there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the property, depending on the size. We have to have a good relationship, and they're the people who's going to give you the most information about their property because they've been living in it. Yeah, they've been experiencing the problems. Occupancy assessment. Yeah, who's in the property? Do we need to employ any special circumstances for them? Yeah, RD SAP collection. Yeah, our RD SAP collection, we have to go that little bit further. We have to make sure that we're picking up all the different types of walls, all the different types of roofs. Measured surveys. People don't fully understand what a measured survey is. It's new to us. Yeah, DEA, we collect 2 measurements: width, depth, height. Yeah, here we do every single room. Yeah, and we put in ventilation where ventilation is. So what is to be included in that? Ventilation assessments is new to us. Yeah, but it's a key point of a retrofit assessment. Yeah, do we know do we have an understanding on the different types of ventilation? Yeah, and how it's used and why it's used. This, I mean, at the moment, I'm a retrofit assessor and a coordinator, and I've done the training through the Retrofit Academy. They're very key on the fabric and the ventilation. I'm sure you've been into many properties where you've got a PIV on the landing. Do we know how that works? Yeah, is that the reason why the bathroom has got mold and condensation? Because it's pushing air back into that room. If you haven't got background ventilation in any particular room, it's just going to keep that air in that room. recording of defects and issues. Again, something new for us, but it is an equally important job. So we need to identify what the problems are, describe them, explain them and diagnose them and capture them on a good quality photo. Understanding the physics of the property will help you identify any problems you may have, any issues. And then you can explain it, because we do a lot of mirroring as well. So we will look, if you've got a problem on the inside, we will look to make sure to see if there's a matching problem on the outside. Just understanding that. This is where the DAs need to have some more additional training, is to understand why things happen. Additional information. We at Equans have added a few extra bits to our condition reports because we were part of the demo. We've been, if you look at our retrofit assessments when we did our demos 18 months ago, 2 years ago, to where we are now, they're vastly improved. We've got more information because we've learned as we've carried on through the process of what information the retrofit coordinator needs, what the designer needs, what the installer needs. So we put all that information on it at the beginning. We look at where the gas pipe is, because we need to know, because are we going to need to remove it, or are we going to need to do thermal bridging around it? We also identify any potential thermal bridging issues. These are all extra to what I imagine most of your accreditation schemes will tell you need to collect. These are just experience that we've done over the last 2 years of what we need to ensure that our retrofit assessments are good and can be used by all the parties necessary. And the last bit is condition reports. The assessor writes up their own. We find that if the assessor writes up the condition report, I know some companies will send the assessor out and someone else writes up the report. We find that if our assessor writes up the condition report, that one photo will tell that assessor 20 things, whereas if someone else is writing it up, it's only going to tell him one thing, which was made on the notes. We standardise our layout. We will produce our reports from, if you walk from the front of the door, so if the retrofit coordinator or the installer, he can read our reports as he walks around the property. We don't try to jump backwards and forwards. Every room's assessed. And good quality photos. And this is a bit of a corny one after this one, because I'm about to finish. Today was all about being good. Tomorrow will look better.
Thanks, Jarrod. That's very clear. It's probably better than my set of slides as well, actually. Mine are very drab and dry. Jarrod sets me off with the problem, really, because I'm going to talk to you about a standard. And standards, as everyone knows, are wildly exciting, and they're what everyone loves to follow. But Jarrod's kind of already set off the scene with what good looks like. So what I'm going to do is hopefully reinforce that. Because although Jarrod and his team may be making sterling efforts to provide excellent quality retrofit assessment reports, after all, he's the Retrofit Assessor of the Year, we'd expect that. It might be true to say that not everyone's doing it as well as that. And that's probably due to a lack of standardisation. So I think let's try and build on what Jarrod's just been talking to us about. So that's me. I'm going to talk to you about the latest developments in the Assessor standard. So just very quickly, I'm building physics. I have a couple of test facilities up in the University of Salford that we do energy performance of buildings on. I'm not going to talk to you about that today. I'm going to talk to you about something different. This is me and what I do. My history isn't just being an academic. I'm also a chartered building surveyor. I have a PhD in the performance of buildings, and I've got lots of experience in housing. And I'm currently an academic at the University of Salford and have been for 12 years. So that's me. I've got quite a decent background in terms of looking at buildings, hopefully. And please, I'm not just an academic. That's the first thing that people usually level at me. I've been there, and I've done exactly the same type of surveys that Jarrod was talking about, right from when I was a youngster coming out of university. So, unfortunately, what we always like to start any retrofit project with is a picture of disasters and how retrofit goes wrong. It's the lifeblood of a good retrofit session. I'm not going to have any, I'm afraid. We'll try and put a positive note on things. But there is just one, because I thought it's quite interesting. And this is just what happens when things do, not bad quality, just absolutely wrong. So you'll figure out that there's a massive problem in there. The air conditioning unit has been fitted to the wrong side of the building. But it just goes to show that accidents do happen, and with the right guidance, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Unless something bizarre is happening in terms of heat exchange there, which might be, but there's a fan at the bottom of the bed as well, so that probably doesn't bode well. Right, anyway, so that's the fun out of the way. On to the standards. So, past 2035 should cover all publicly funded retrofit in the UK. 30th of June 21st, that's when 21, that's when it came in. Let's take it as read that that's the case. So, within the text of past 2035, it actually says, in no uncertain terms, that another standard should be developed. So we've seen a couple of standards that sit around past 2035. We have 40101, which is all about how we evaluate retrofit. Don't ask me why, but that was done before we do assessment. I'm not too sure how that was carried out, but it was, and it works. It's a very good standard. I was part of it myself. This one is all about the assessment. Okay, so the assessment is alluded to in past 2035, and knowing Pither Rickaby quite well, who wrote the vast majority of it, certainly the good chunks of it, it's good, but it needs some more work, it's safe to say. So, in the actual text, it says that a standard will be developed. But there's already a lot of retrofit assessments happen. So this was going back a few months ago. There'd already been 200,000 retrofit assessments completed. And that's a figure directly from Trustmark. So we may have done some that are maybe less than perfect. But having said that, judging by what Jarrod's doing, it should all be pretty good. So retrofit assessors, very briefly. This is really, in terms of iconography, this is what I think a retrofit assessor is. It's kind of somewhere in between a building surveyor or a property expert in surveying, architecture, that type of thing, which is thus the damp meter, and someone who works with energy, thus the clip art of the EPC graph there. And that is actually quite difficult. And it doesn't exist. It never has existed. And hopefully it's quite a big sea change to have people looking at energy with one eye on energy and one eye on the condition of the building. It should never have been done in isolation, but it has been, and we are where we are. This assessment standard hopefully will try and bring some more information to that sector, I think, hopefully. So it's chaired by myself. It's called 40104. It's quite easy to remember because it's the same forward as it is backwards, and we got I'd say very decent panel in there of a representative for most portions of the industry, pretty much all I would say. So we got architectural design, energy performance. We've got the energy Pither. Pither represent the accreditation schemes for energy assessors. We've got people in insulation, property care, RICS, English heritage, building conservation experts as well. So there's lots of really kind of good people in that room, and it works well. And obviously young Alan is on the panel as well. So I've mentioned in an earlier session, but retrofit assessment is without contention in general. No one has a massive problem with assessing buildings. It's not owned by the insulation companies or different lobbies of the sector. It's kind of what we do first. It's building physics, building performance, condition, energy. So we split the standard up into 8 key areas, and they're pretty straightforward. So context is first. So this is all about the shape, the size, where the building is. We're appraising the building. We're seeing kind of things around statutory limitations, so right to light. We look at historical interest, architectural interest, the full gambit, and a lot of the things that Jarrod talked about as well. But even things like access to the site and major roads, can we get the materials to the site? Can we do the practical stuff? Okay, so this is a bit more than energy. It's the full piece. We talk about orientation, we talk about wind-driven rain, we talk about exposure levels, we talk about solar gain, we talk about north-facing walls, all the things that can have a big effect on the way that a retrofit either might be selected or the way that a retrofit might work. Then we talk about condition. This is often where it can either go very right or very wrong. There's lots of things that can go wrong with a building that would prohibit certain measures of retrofit from being done. If they're not picked up, and they're not picked up well, retrofit will go on and it will be bad retrofit. Simple as that. The outcomes will not be good for the occupant, for the investors, for whoever's involved. So we're talking about locating and dictating the severity of any defects. And there's only 2 categories past 2035. Does it need fixing before the retrofit, or does it not need fixing before the retrofit? So let's not talk ourselves into thinking this is an RICS home buyer report. It's not. It's looking for things that are wrong with the building, and do we need to fix them before the stuff happens to it? That puts a little bit of a twist, because we have to sometimes have in our mind what we might do to that building. But as assessors, we're not there to make that decision. But we should have some expertise around different measures. So we describe and we talk about any defects in the building, whether it's services, whether it's construction, whether it's damp, mould, condensation, structural issues, cracks and things like this. It's quite a detailed survey. And as Jarrod was saying, put the idea of 20-minute surveys out of your mind completely. This is an hour and a half, 2-hour surveys. I've done them. I did them when I was writing training courses for this, and I've done them for people as well. You're not in that building for 20 minutes. Occupancy. So occupancy, since the ill-fated Green Deal, has been totally remiss from any energy assessment that we do in the UK. Shouldn't have been. It's nonsense that it was taken out. Unfortunately, it's not been updated very well, but it's now back in. So we're now looking at occupancy, but in more than just energy. We're looking at what are the people in the building. Is there any vulnerable people, children, elderly, people with disabilities, things like this that are going to either affect the retrofit, or we need to make changes to that building to make their life a little bit easier. And then we do, obviously, the occupancy assessment, which impacts on the energy performance of the building as well. Ventilation, as Jarrod said, ventilation is something that I've seen people just not do in retrofit assessment. We need some new equipment as energy assessors moving into this world. We need to have things that measure the flow rate of fans, and they're expensive things. They need calibrating every year, and they sometimes can be tricky to use, and they're very easy to use badly. They're a little bit tricky to use well. This isn't putting a piece of tissue paper on an extract fan or your hand next to it. This is measuring the flow rate. This is checking that the paths are there for the ventilation. As we mentioned in the last session, if you've got an extract fan pulling and it's only pulling from that room, and it hasn't got undercuts and stuff on the door, it just won't work. Simple as that. So this is a fundamental to the assessment. Absolutely fundamental. Get the ventilation assessment wrong, don't send me the report, would be my response, because I'm not interested in it. Energy. So energy really sits around RD-SAP, SAP and or PHPP for those in the room who are into that type of thing. I think the vast majority of stuff will be SAP, or either full or RD, but PHPP is perfectly acceptable. And then we need to think about the measures and make them appropriate and things like this. Bear in mind that the occupancy assessment can have an effect on that, so we should encapsulate some of the work that we do in occupancy in terms of energy as well. Significance. So it doesn't have to be a castle, as I've shown there, to be significant. We've spent a great deal of time in this panel, this writing panel, rehashing some of the work that we did around heritage assessment of buildings. That's not to say protected buildings. I'm not really talking about a listed building here. We're talking about something that has characteristics of heritage. It's been rehashed, it's been simplified, and it's been probably a little bit easier to follow as well in terms of what we're looking at, why we're looking at. I think if you give guidance that isn't easy to follow, people will only ever provide bad data. So, speaking of data, reporting is really key to this process. Jarrod showed one of his reports there. I couldn't help but notice, how sensible it is to even just doing it in the way you walk around the house. Make it easy for people to understand. The amount of people that wouldn't do that is quite unbelievable, to be honest. With the reporting, this is a key part of the standard. We're all going out with a blank sheet of paper at the moment, and we're filling it in, and we're either handwriting it, or we're typing it in, or we're putting it into an Excel sheet, or an SQL database, or whatever it is. And that's great. Everyone's doing it pretty well, as far as I'm concerned, in that regard. If we had a way of standardizing it, then this is where my researcher head comes on. So if I could standardize the condition reporting, how we look at ventilation systems, how we look at condensation, mold, and everything else that can go wrong with a building, pre and post retrofit, if we had that in a format that has a schema behind it in exactly the same way as we do for the EPC, we've done 200,000 assessments. Have we not missed something? Have we not missed the fact that we could have carried out lifestyle assessments, condensation assessments, ventilation assessments, and had a massive 200,000 home database looking at fuel poverty, looking at different regions, looking at different construction types? I think we've missed a huge chunk, and I don't intend missing it at the end of this standard. If we have a structured database approach to this, we could make government's life a little bit easier. We could make my life easier as a researcher, and that's all I'm interested in. And we could improve the way we do things. We could see if something works pre and post very easily. So reporting is a key thing. It shouldn't be ignored. We kind of really need to make sure that happens. So digital formats, labelled photographs. Like Jarrod said, some of the photographs you get back of just a radiator or something, or a crack taken from here to where Alan is. Some of them are second only to useless. But if we have this kind of concise database of a building, and then we start to talk about which we always do at this point, the building passport that everyone continues to remind me is coming round the corner and has been for the last probably 10 years, then if we have all this in a database that the occupant can view as well, I think it's really useful. So, qualifications. So in terms of qualifications, there's a tricky one. There is a retrofit assessor, let's call it a scope of requirements at the moment. There will be people who do qualifications, and there will be formalised qualifications. There already is. What I would say, the qualifications that we have now, and I'm saying it in an open forum, they are working, but I think when we put this assessor standard out, a lot of people have agreed that we probably need to do some further development of the assessors. Okay, I think that makes sense. It might be a CPD activity, it might be some reskilling, whatever it is. I think we're all going to need to be brought up to a level. We kind of have to do that. We can't put a standard out and have no one know how to use it. So, quick overview. We'll publish it by hopefully the summer. It will undergo scrutiny. It has to go through consultation, public consultation, so everyone's got a right to kind of say what they think about it, good, bad, or indifferent. It's a huge opportunity for data. I think condition and energy improvement is a pivotal moment. This is the first time we've ever in the UK put condition and energy together. Rightly or wrongly, it's the first time we've ever done it in a formalised structure. Hopefully, we'll get better quality retrofit and avoid poor retrofit and poor outcomes. So we always talk about risks. So the risks of retrofit. The risks of retrofit aren't things like solid wall and interstitial condensation. Yes, of course they are. They're risks to the occupant, they're risks to the building. The risk is not doing it. So if we look at these statistics, a good third of the energy is, and 20% of the carbon dioxide is from homes. We need to improve a huge amount of homes. 29 million homes we'll have to do in some way. 1.8 homes per minute up to 2050. I don't think we're quite there on that yet. But the main risks of this, if we keep living like we are, and in this status quo, and people continue to remain in fuel poverty, 13% of households, 3.6 million households living in fuel poverty. That's in 2020. It's got worse since that by a significant chunk as well. People will continue to die in cold conditions in poor quality homes. A lot of people have, and a lot of people will in the future. And then we expose the NHS to all of these kind of debilitating conditions and poor people as well. BRE, that report was taken from last year. BRE have just put out another report which says it's even worse. So that's the risk of not doing what we're talking about. And if we don't make, if we stop thinking everything's a risk and we don't do it, this is what's going to happen. Hopefully the retrofit assessment will take some of that risk away. And that's all I've got to say. I think Alan's going to open the floor to some questions. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you very much, Richard and Jarrod, for those presentations. We now have just under 15 minutes for a discussion and any questions that you might have. So we have someone's hand up there. I don't know whether someone will bring you a microphone in 1 second, or perhaps 5 seconds. So down the front here, thank you.
Hi, just want to say that was really informative and really appreciate the time you've taken to provide that information. My question is about the current situation that we're seeing on the actual coalface at the moment, in which the assessors can be a hairdresser last week, do a couple of weeks training, and they're out there and they're going. Have we missed a trick here in keeping our assessments generic, and actually they should have been house type, archetype based, instructing the assessor on some of the idiosyncrasies of each particular archetype and pointing them in the right direction in not missing essential details?
Good question. Richard, do you want to come in on that?
I would disagree. But I would disagree for a reason. I think if we start pushing people into different routes, which we already have the kind of A, B, and C, which have caused a lot of disagreement, shall we say, and I think will go ultimately. I do agree the fact that is it good that someone could do 2 weeks and then, like you say, they're considered an expert. We have to hit the numbers. If we're talking about doing 1 million households a year, we have to have this army of assessors. You can do very good training in a short period of time, and you can have ongoing learning, and you can do what I used to do. So when I came out of university to become a surveyor, I was shadowed, you know, and I'd follow someone around who was very experienced. I think that might be a way that we can upskill people and hopefully make sure they're up to a good standard before they kind of go and do hundreds of assessments as well. It's a tricky question because we can't do it with no assessors, but equally we can't put them on a 3-year degree, and that's coming from someone who works at a university. So,
but
yeah.
Is it that at the moment we're leaving the industry open to not corruption, but I'm seeing a lot of assessments that are very measured driven rather than house driven?
Okay, so
Yes.
I can try and give some information on that. That is the very nature of the standard. The very nature of the standard is 2 things. So people can go away and write good courses and have good qualifications with a good standard of people coming out at the end of them, but also so that whoever in this room is a client or a user of those services has full faith that they can specify in a tender or a contract that it will be done to that standard. So like we have in the RICS world, our home buyers report, we can say that is the standard that we want. They've got all the technical standards sat behind them. And if it isn't done to that standard, they get sued for negligence. That's the only way you can do it.
Jarrod, would you like to add anything?
With regards to training, all our assessors will be shadowed for a period up to 3 months. So yes, they may have done the 1 week virtual training course by the accreditation schemes, but then they will go out with a more experienced retrofit assessor until we feel that they have been able to complete the report. I mean, most of our job is through observation, so as long as they can observe something and they understand it, I mean, the Retrofit Academy is improving the training because they do a level 4 course, which should be the target for all retrofit assessors, or one of the accreditation schemes bringing up their training to that kind of level, because it will cover the physics, how to report defects, and that's a good base, and that is what, 30 hours worth of 30 hours worth of training over a 10-week period. But while we're still doing that, we're still shadowing them. I've been doing EPC since they were started in 2008, and I've been doing retrofit assessments since they did the demo. As I said before in my presentation, our assessments have changed vastly. It's all because of the training and the shadowing and the input from everybody else. It's not just my ideas, it's the teams. They will see something different.
That they should be reassessed?
It should be reassessed.
Yeah, so ongoing training, reassessment.
I think they have CPD activities and things like this. A reassessment, I'm not too sure. That's an audit role, after all. Just mark audit these people. If they aren't hitting the standards of audit, I'm sure Jarrod will tell you, having been through them.
Been through the audits.
Then they can't do it.
Can we allow someone else to ask a question? We've got a couple of people with hands in the air at least, so we start with the...
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a quick follow-on from that, and then I got my own question. I mean, I live in a 1904 house. The slate damp-proof course has been breached. The underfloor timbers are rotten. There's mould up the inside of the walls. The loft installation, the insulation's fallen out. I mean, how do you build that in? That you make sure those repairs are undertaken before you go in with the retrofit. Because I'm not sure that was particularly well covered. Also, going ahead, I mean, this is what is best practice retrofit. This whole event is about looking to the future and holistic. So where's the combination of retrofit for, I mean, are we just talking about cold, or are we talking about heat? Heat deaths might be a big thing in the future, but what about retrofitting PV? What about green roofs? What about water? Water recycling. All of those actually should be incorporated now. I know I'm asking for gold plating, but that needs to be done as quickly as possible as well.
So I'll take 2 questions. So first of all, it's difficult to cover everything in 15 minutes. It's what's it up to now? I'm about 70 pages. The standard. It's a chunky old thing.
It's a monster.
So. It's not a monster. It's great. It's just big.
It's great, but it's...
That type of thing is covered well, and also there's a certain element of investigating things as well. Damp condensation, rotten floors. That's kind of a bit more than a single defect. So we'd be talking about investigating that defect. So we'll have a series of kind of recommended people, structural engineers, damp timber experts, that would look at that after a retrofit assessor would have looked at it, because that's what we need to do. Is more complex than with the best work in the world, Jarrod. It's more complex than a retrofit assessor. The next point, in as much as green roofs and this and this and this, as speaking only for the retrofit assessor, we're only there to see what the building is like. Okay, we're starting to examine the art of the possible in the building. We have to rely on the designers, the coordinators, and other stakeholders. It's the designers and the coordinators that will have the flourish of innovation on top. We're just the guys on the ground. Okay, but that should be encouraged, of course.
Thank you, Richard. Question at the front here?
Hi. If you're doing an assessment, how can you determine the build-up of, say, an external wall, or if you've got a ground floor property and it's obviously pretty solid, how do you know if there's any insulation there, or do you have to assume the worst case?
Unfortunately, you have to go back to your RDSAP, your DEA training. There's a lot of defaults which still exist within the assessments. Yes, I couldn't do that. If the floor is suspended, we will get a specialist in to come and check to see what sort of installation is. We could go back to the we work with housing associations, so you go back to the housing association. We've experienced some properties on one of our projects where you immediately walk up to the property, you'll see air vents, and then you go into the property, and the floor is solid. By speaking to the tenant who's been in there for 20 years, back in the 1990s, that they stripped out the suspended floor and put in, a concrete slab floor. So we then went back to the housing association to see what sort of information they had with regards to that makeup. So that's what retrofit assessors should be able to see, and go in further and examine and inspect and see what that information is needed. With regards to wall construction, most of our properties have been repointed in our particular project because of where they are. So we don't know, as DEAs, we would just have to go back to the default. There are other companies out there which we will have to engage to do a full, cavity wall inspection. So we're just there purely just to report it and bring it to people's attentions.
Yeah. So I'll just pick up on that just for 1 sec. So this, as where it says, it's intersecting energy and surveying, property expertise and surveying school of thought, and this is well documented in the standard, is along pathology. It's about finding the root of the problem, and we do have to. So we're looking for risks. So if we do see a suspended timber floor, like Jarrod said, it's got vents. We are looking to see if those vents are obstructed. We're doing a drop heel test. We're doing the standard stuff that a kind of building surveyor would do as well. So this isn't just look at it, suspended timber floor, off we go. This is a suspended timber floor. Are there any risks to that floor and to an impending retrofit of that floor as well?
Yeah, also there's nothing stopping the coordinator going back later to do more investigations if they need to, but there has to be a limit on what the assessor can do in their initial visit. Can we have the microphone at the back? There were one or two people trying to get attention before from there.
Will we ever get to the point where you don't have to do a full survey every time and you can make use of the information from the last one?
No.
Good question.
No. Next question. I think that's... joking apart, no.
Sure.
Every building is totally unique, especially when we bind in the occupants. And I think if we're looking at risks to buildings, then no, I think that's a road I won't be going down.
Well, I think there's a scope for reusing some information, but it always needs to be checked and updated. You can't assume that nothing's changed in even 12 months.
Hi, I was wanting to know whether PAS 2035 is totally relevant to the able to pay market, because we've talked about the assessor comes in, there's all these layers of people behind them who are working with designers and coordinators, and if you can't look at something, we'll get someone else in. And the able to pay market, so I go in, I'll do everything. I'm the one pulling up the floor, sticking the camera in the wall, writing a report, doing a thermal imaging survey, building a PHPP model, doing all the details of thermal bridging. And people want contact with one person. It's how that, does it work in the able to pay market?
So we've designed the standard specifically. So who knows what might happen to a government policy to start with, okay? Something might go away, God forbid. We've designed the standard to be used on its own as something that you can specify to have a standardised assessment of your building before any retrofit assessment takes place. Now, of course, it fits into 2035. That's its driver. But we've designed it in such a way that it can be extracted and used by other people if needed. If other people started to use it for other projects, I would be absolutely delighted. I would see that as a massive success.
So it's a kind of a one-man band, self-employed person, having, for instance, the way of recording data and electronic formatting isn't so readily available to me because I'm not part of Elmhurst Energy or Retrofit Academy or whoever else.
Absolutely, it's a standard. Yeah, of course.
No, but the point being that actually getting access to the software to do that is harder if you're not trained through those organisations.
I agree, but that's a commercial thing. And then next, obviously, is insurance and things like that. But the idea is that it can be taken out of that system.
Should we take one more question? Time's virtually up.
As assessors, we're heavily dependent on our accreditation bodies. There's a few of them here today. Mine is just down here, and I'm not particularly happy with them, to be honest. Is there a standard for them?
Are you sorry?
Is there a standard for them? How are they? Because we're dependent on how they interpret PAS 2035.
There is. So there's an overarching standard by Pither, who are that sits over the top of all the accreditation schemes that they're all signed up to. There's the operating scheme requirements, which that's basically a type of standard that does fit in line with this. And Andrew Parkin, who's the chair of Pither, is sat on that panel that I've just showed you the slides for. And they've agreed, and I'm sure Andrew would speak if he was here, to say that whatever comes out of that panel and that standard, they will absorb as accreditation schemes.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but that's...
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks again to our speakers, Jarrod and Richard, and I hope you found it interesting.